Well, thank you very much, John, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to CIWM for inviting me to open your conference. It's a huge and humbling privilege to be asked as a mere academic to talk to so many expert and professional people in a field that has been transformed over the last 2 decades. I was asked to be challenging, and I will be challenging, I hope, and will reserve my main challenge for the end, so you'll have something to look forward to. But I was also asked to address the theme of the circular economy, which of course is a theme which has new rhetorical momentum. It is not a new theme, and I hope you'll forgive me and not think me immodest if I quote from a book that I wrote in 1992, that is a little more than 20 years ago, when I said this, after some discussion of the issue of sustainability. The overall result in conforming to the sustainability conditions would be to transform the dominant model of the industrial economy from a linear to a circular form, and then I had a couple of pictures to illustrate what I meant by that. In the linear conception, resources, land, labor, capital, are combined in the economic process to produce goods and wastes. The model is open-ended. The resources are assumed to be supplied from and the waste disposed of outside the model, the environment, with the economic process being the model's central focus. Overwhelmingly, the chief objective applied to this model is growth of production with no evident constraints because the source and sink functions of the environment are excluded from it. Your president has already made clear that that is not a model of very great relevance to the world we now inhabit. In the multi-circular model, analogous to living systems, the waste from one product or process are the resources for another, so that there is no waste and no disposal problem or pollution, just a great cycle of transformation. In living systems, of course, this cycle is powered by the sun. In the human economy, sustainability requires that other energy sources are increasingly replaced by solar energy and non-renewable resources by renewables. The constraints implicit in this circular as opposed to linear flow clearly bring into question the extent to which throughput material production in the model can be increased. So that's enough of that. So these ideas have been around for quite a long time. There's a new dynamic, a new language to do with resource efficiency, resource productivity, competitiveness, growth, and jobs that is now part of that. And on the waste side, there's been quite a lot of progress. In the UK in 1992, landfill accounted for well over 90% of the way we managed our wastes, and it's now, of course, less than 50%. There's no mystery as to how this has been achieved. You, in this room, and your organizations have played a major role in that, but so, of course, has policy. EU regulation has been particularly important through the Waste Framework Directive, through the targets for biodegradable waste, through the priority waste stream directives, through the regulations on tyres, hazardous wastes, chemicals, REACH, through new ideas such as extended producer responsibility, and by allowing different member states to implement these ideas in widely differing ways with different collection schemes. Those of us who want to question the UK's place in the EU must ask themselves whether we would have had these benefits if we had not been a member state of that body. The UK, of course, was a pioneer with the landfill tax and with the aggregates tax. I remember when the landfill tax was introduced in 1996 at £7 a tonne for active waste, which was said to be the optimal level by fellow environmental economist colleagues. It now, of course, is £72 a tonne for active waste. And this reminds me that environmental economic instruments, which have been a major academic concern of mine, can be set on the basis of three levels. One kind of concern is to reflect the externality of the waste, and that was supposed to be the £7 a tonne figure, which I never agreed with, but nevertheless it was the subject of some rigorous work. Another way of setting the level of a tax is to meet a standard that has been defined through the political process, through the kind of EU regulations that I've already been talking about. And a third way, which is, in my perception, what's driven the landfill tax, is the need to incentivize investment. It's always been clear that waste management that moved waste up the so-called hierarchy would require huge investment. And many of your companies are the companies that needed to make that investment. And many of you, practically all of you, are private companies, and you need, therefore, to make profits. And you can't make investments unless they deliver profits. And that is what the landfill tax has been all about, and why it has got to and needed to get to £70 a tonne, which is a serious kind of commitment. Well, that's the past. There are now, of course, new aspirations for zero waste, for a circular economy, as your president said, and these are not mere kind of academic rhetorical aspirations, as perhaps they were back in 1992. We have Scotland's zero waste plan, and we have numbers of major companies determined to move towards zero waste. How is this to be achieved? At the lowest possible cost. Well, waste prevention is obviously very important. There's not been anything like as much progress there as there has been in waste management. But above all, we need to get smarter, especially if we want this agenda to help us to deliver on the competitiveness, growth, and jobs objectives, which are currently at the top of the priority list of public policy. And I suggest to you that the agenda now is how to prevent materials from becoming wastes. Conceptually, materials are just stuff. They are resources when they have a positive economic value, and they are wastes when they have a negative economic value. And in the journey from resources to wastes, materials lose their economic value. The waste management industry, your industry, adds value to waste. That's what you do through disposal, energy recovery, recycling, reuse, and other methods. But this adding value process through your industry adds costs as far as the economy as a whole is concerned. In all my academic life, I've never seen a real estimate of what the costs to the economy of waste management, that kind of end-of-pipe process, are, but I imagine it's not insignificant. Of course, in a macroeconomy, one person's costs is another person's livelihoods, and that's very important to bear in mind. But nevertheless, if we could move away from waste to materials management, then I think you could both make more money and add more value, and the economy would experience lower costs. And that would require your industry to intervene earlier in the journey from resources to wastes, to reduce the quantity of materials required to fulfill a service through lightweighting, perhaps, to increase the time materials fulfilled their service before becoming wastes, product durability, to reduce the use of energy and other materials while the product is in service, efficiency, to reduce the use of materials in service that are hazardous or difficult to recycle or dispose of, material substitution, to design products that are easier to recycle and reuse, eco-design, to incentivize separation and collection systems that minimize the costs of recycling and reuse, and to facilitate industrial clusters that exchange materials while they were still resources to prevent them becoming wastes. The idea of industrial symbiosis, which is particularly close to my heart because it most closely resembles the living economy, which the human economy increasingly needs to try to mimic. It's clear what the policies are to encourage these kinds of transformations, and your president was quite right to call this a transformation. Landfill tax and virgin resources taxes are going to play an important role. So will regulations, standards, codes for recycled content, green public procurement, reinterpretations of extended producer responsibility such that materials remain the legal property of the branded manufacturer who is regulated to collect, recycle, and reuse them. Regulations on exports, as your president has already mentioned, and greatly enhanced information on who owns what, where. This is the challenge for me of this century. I think you, as professionals, need, those of you who still think of yourselves as waste managers, and I've noticed a change in that thinking going on as I've been in touch with CIWM professionals over recent years. You need to reinvent yourselves as materials and resource managers. Waste is so last century, don't you think? And the CIWM might like to think about changing its name. I told you I had a big challenge for you. The Chartered Institute of Materials Management, even the Chartered Institute of Resource Management. The 21st century is to be the age of the circular economy with no wastes. Then CIWM might be the name of people who hadn't got a job to do. Thank you very much.